Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And now it's time for the year-end list, so let's start off with the most painful and the most popular. The top 10 worst hit songs of 2017. You know, there have been years where putting together this list is pretty easy. Sometimes like 2015 or 2012, where the bad songs can't otherwise diminish a strong or interesting year, so it flows out pretty quick. Or on the flip side, we get years like 2016, where the avalanche of awful is so pronounced I almost have too much material. And while that list might be painful for me to revisit, the rage just makes it all surge out. It gets by pretty quick. 2017 hasn't really been that year, and it's a little bit tough to explain why. You can make a comparison to 2014 and how so much of this year defaulted towards average instead of a more pronounced brand of awful. I'm certainly not quite as angry toward this list as I have been in previous years like 2016, but the truly excellent hits were much stronger in 2017. That boosted the whole thing up on average. And what I think has befuddled some critics is how pop was effectively overtaken by the hip-hop and R&B aesthetic on the Hot 100. It might have become more pronounced in 2013, but by 2017 the takeover was complete. Now, if you weren't paying more attention to streaming instead of the radio, I'm sorry, you're gonna get left behind. And thus, in 2017, the truly bad songs are a bit of a mix of the pop songs tumbling towards the mono genre and the lazy, bargain barrel dumpster fire that is the dregs of trap and hip-hop. And again, to establish the rules, the songs had to debut on the year-end Hot 100 list of 2017. This is only the popular stuff, and being purely boring doesn't cut it for me. Given how much of this I've covered on Billboard Breakdown, I've long been numb to the endless swirl of interchangeable trap bangers and their brand of disposable mediocrity. If you want to land on this list, you gotta really irritate me or piss me off, get under my skin. So okay, let's get going with some dishonorable mentions.
Slippery, whoa, excuse me, please, I'm up, believe me, get beat, cause I'm flexing Rari's, you can bet on me.
Alright, look, I don't hate Migos. In fact, I would make the argument that 2017 was the first year I understood their appeal at all. And at the very least, Offset seems like he's got a promising solo career ahead of him when he splits from the group. But of their songs and collaborations to make this year-end list, and there were a lot of them, this was the one I liked the least. Mostly because it was indicative of everything I find intolerable about Migos. A by-the-number trap beat fused with a melody that was half theremin, half atonal drone, all annoyance. Gucci Mane utterly failing to keep up with Migos. He did better on I Get the Bag, but not excuse here. And with Migos, they're on their choppy free association pileup of references that seem to get actively stupider the more you think about them. Between Quavo counting off the time as if he was on Sesame Street on his verse, Offset with, again, the best verse, talking about being in this girl's ovaries, lovely, and Takeoff remaining irrelevant. Sorry, Takeoff. This was a turgid slog of a song with a chorus, I should remind you, about taking your girl and getting her all slippery between the legs with their brand name porn and ad-libs. Well, ladies, if Quavo rapping about his ice tray gets you all excited, all the power to you, but no, I'm skipping this.
Said you don't wanna keep you around forever. I want you to love me now.
This year, Halsey released Hopeless Fountain Kingdom, and it sucked. An overwrought, pretentious mess that I think everybody forgot existed a good few weeks after it came out. And yet, because the radio finds her safe and inoffensive enough, she continues to get hits. And since her singles choice is crap, instead of Strangers, we got Now or Never, a song that actively ripped off Rihanna's Needed Me for a colorless slice of ugly relationship melodrama where Halsey prostrates herself in front of her partner saying they're always right, before then trying to draw some line in the sand and then just wanting this partner to nail her. And for a song like this to remotely work, even in theory, there needs to be some sort of sexual appeal. But the production is a trap-infused, tuneless bore with barely any melody, and Halsey has the charisma of auto-tuned mush. America, you let this become a hit over any track from Lorde. What's wrong with you?
Running from the cop, shooting at the ops.
Yo, Pierre, you wanna come out here?
Shooting at the ops, cause I run that block. Give me top, in my drop top.
Yeah, Yeah, not much to say about this one, except that Playboi Carti has never been interesting or compelling in his mumbled blend of incoherent ad-libs that don't rhyme with anything. The only reason this isn't higher is a halfway decent sample that the production swamps out an ugly bass, but it's at least more interesting than Playboi Carti's inability to string more than 4 bars together consistently, even as he tries to say that he's your bitch's dad. I would say of all the artists on this list, he's the least likely to have a future, but it turns out there are already dead careers that are higher on this list. Come on, let's add his to the pile.
She looked me in my eyes. She said, baby, I am not afraid to die. Push me to the edge. All my friends are dead. Push me to the edge. All my friends are dead. Push me to the edge. All my friends are dead. Push me to the edge.
Okay, look, I had the appeal of this song explained to me. I know I'm gonna make people angry putting this song on the dishonorable mentions, and in the worst moments when it feels like you're on the top of the world as your sanity and pain collapses in around you in existential emptiness, I could see why a song like this would click, especially with a younger audience in 2017. That said, Lil Uzi Vert's auto-tuned caterwauling sounds like a cat in the microwave, the ugly tap of the keyboard that punctuates the oily goop with the melody, and if he was looking to make his ode to traumatic breakups connect, maybe he shouldn't have filled the other bars of counting his money, artless bragging, and trying to steal your girl. And having listened to the rest of Love Is Rage 2, I feel this needs to be stressed. Existential emptiness might explain your behavior, but it doesn't excuse it, or make you any less of an incoherent annoyance. And I'm sorry, tenuous subtext can only get you so far. I mean, it kept it off the list proper, but man, it was close.
Don't matter what you say, don't matter what you do, I only wanna do bad things to you. So good that you can't explain it. What can I say? It's complicated.
Alright, look, I reviewed Machine Gun Kelly's Bloom earlier this year. Sucked then, sucks now. Taking a perfectly good fastball sample and trying to turn into another toxic relationship song that is nowhere near as interesting as either MGK or Camila Cabello think it is. Her raspy upper register sounds awful as she tries to croon through a non-explanation of why she's still with this guy, and somehow MGK managed to sound even worse, with some of the most basic flows of his entire career that's about the furthest thing from sexy. He has production that's a desaturated, grooveless mess, too bright and faux elegant in the keyboards to capture any sort of edge, with absolutely no momentum to be a decent pop rap song. In other words, it's not the only example of fuckboy rap on this list, but it is a pretty gross one.
But I wanna stay with you until we're grown old. Say you won't let go. Just say you won't let go.
Alright, look, you might not like Ed Sheeran, but I would take him over this mushmouth wannabe any damn day of the week. Now, somehow this nearly stayed a full year on the Hot 100 charts because really adult alternative radio needs something gutless and generic to fill the time, but Say You Won't Let Go is somehow even worse, most because the entire song drips with insincerity. Forget how your prospective lover probably doesn't want to be reminded of her throwing up the first time you met, but in the pre-chorus, James Arthur blows her off when she asks him to come home with her, and then he spends the rest of the song desperately trying to get back in her good graces with the biggest ripoff of Thinking Out Loud since Thomas Rhett. And I get there is a certain charm to the mundane details of the relationship and the love that will last years to come. But when you start saying you want your ghost to stay in love, trying to stay together, it's completely overplaying your hand and just gets really damn creepy, especially with all the saccharine, faux romantic framing around it. Look, I might not like Ed Sheeran's Perfect for as utterly dull as it is, but at least he's got a better grasp of sincerity than this trickly slog. Ugh. Next.
I tell all my hoes, rake it up, break it down, back it up, fuck 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 it up, rake it up, rake it up, rake it up.
You know, I don't think this song is getting the righteous flogging it so thoroughly deserves. Mostly because I think everybody decided to give Yo Gotti a pass after finally getting a hit after years in the game with Down in the DM. Which, for the record, it barely missed my worst hits last year. It's not a good song. But at no point does Mike well made to actually give Yo Gotti any sort of defined tune to work with beyond some barely audible weedy fragment. But you know what? There was a part of me that was still kind of forgiving of this. It's a pimp anthem, and the first verse, it wasn't really terrible despite a lot of rhyming words with themselves. But then Nicki Minaj shows up to rhyme China with itself 3 times, then rhyme it with vagina, and then China again. And look, I get Nicki Minaj's dead-eyed shtick. It's preferable to her phoning it in on more pop songs. But does anybody actually like her saying that she's going to be a ditz on your dick? And then somehow Yo Gotti makes it even worse, if possible. Not just the pointless 2 short samples, but then going on about how his haters should bleed once a month like his bitches do. Or how pillow talk is for the hoes, despite you praying for the pussy in your first verse. Or how he says he doesn't make drama on social media, despite your biggest ever hit about being all down in those DMs. Look, okay, respect to Yo Gotti for being in the game this long, but what doesn't reek of non-effort in the song, namely the hook, is just incompetent. Again, enjoy your run, dude. Just know that when Nicki stops answering your calls, your popularity, it's gonna go the exact same way. And now, on to the list proper, number 10. So this is the sort of song I actually feel a little bit awkward placing on a year-end worst list like this. Most because these 2 guys will never have another hit, and somehow I have more of a Twitter presence than they do. And it almost feels weird to me because it can almost feel unfair going at young kids who have already been forgotten outside of being the punchline to pop chart nerds. No jokes, I was actually considering leaving this song off this list, and then I re-listened to it.
Juju on that beat, Juju on that beat, Juju on that, Juju on that, Juju on that beat. Now slide, drop, hit them for no stop, ayy, don't stop, ayy. Don't stop, hey.
Okay, look, again, I feel like the obituaries for this song were already written last year. It was a Vine dance song blowing up off of a freestyle over an interpolation of a crime mob beat that I actually kind of liked from the crunk era. And indeed, the production keeps it above songs like Watch Me in my books. I'll admit, there's a decent melody there. I kind of dig it. But everything else about Juju on that beat is so wrong. From the utterly flubbed rhymes in the verses to no discernible reason for calling my dad ugly, from the fact that these kids have no coherent presence or charisma or bombast, to how, just like Silent Hill, they grab up chunks of other dances to plug the fact that they've got nothing more to say and none of the presence to do it with. Say what you will about Crunk, at least had some bombast. What blows my mind is that Zayion McCall actually tries to rep from Detroit on his verse. And look, maybe things have changed in 20 years, but the Detroit hip-hop scene that I knew would have sent these kids packing and likely bleeding. And apparently, just like the rest of Vine stars, they're actually still putting out stuff on YouTube, and they actually apparently have an audience, which kind of blew my mind, which makes me feel a little bit better in saying that this song absolutely blows, and you go on Dance It For Your Grandma like in that horrible Big Mama's House interpolation that starts this song. Not sure you're ever going to be able to live that one down. Just saying. Number 9. You know, if you're looking for a white rapper who's probably had a better year than he probably deserves, it was Post Malone, whose debut you all decided that I should review for my 4th year anniversary. Thanks for that. And you know, he seemed like a likable enough dude that I tried to give him a chance. And you know, Candy Paint is still a good song, and I even tolerated Congratulations. But then came some of his stupid as hell comments that if you were looking for depth in your music, don't go listen to hip hop, and his pileup of weak excuses soured me on him again in record time. And oh, he released this.
I've been fucking hoes and popping pillies, man, I feel just like a rock star. All my brothers got that gas and they always be smoking like a rockstar.
Alright, I'm not gonna mince words here. If I Fall Apart had made the year-end list for 2017, it probably would fill this slot, but I didn't like Rockstar from the very debut, and the fact that America let this sit at number 1 for over a month pisses me off. I have always been annoyed when rappers try to co-opt rock slang to appropriate the edge or cool of the genre. Well, it's because it's always indicative of a secret fear to looking back at more lyrical hip-hop which they can't match, but seeing Post Malone do it is absolutely infuriating, because he clearly believes it's the only way he can achieve the star presence and artistic credibility while working in a genre that he neither knows or respects. It's genuinely gross how completely unbelievable all of his references are on this song. Nobody remotely believes you're pulling up with guns or shit, or leaving your show in a cop car. Hell, I'm not even sure you could believably throw a TV out the window in a hotel. And of course, he throws in references to hundreds of groupies he supposedly has grabbing on his pants and a swirl of cocaine in his trailer, all of which, of course, are your girls. And let's not forget 21 Savage, who is screwing a girl and pulling her hair so hard that she's crying. And look, I'm no 21 Savage fan either. Him calling someone soft after that weak-ass Issa album on a verse where he literally references being like a pop star, not a hit rapper, but Post Malone's half-crying auto-tune warbles are really sets my teeth on edge, especially against this desaturated, stuttering trap drone that's the furthest thing from rock with any edge or firepower. It's a bad sign that Rae Sremmurd seemed to understand rock music more than Post Malone does, who isn't worthy of licking the boots of legit rappers or rock stars alike. Dude, you might have said no to Jake Paul, but your brand of fuckboy rap doesn't belong here. Get the hell out of the game before you are seen by somebody. Number 8. And speaking of fuckboy rap,
so say the X and O's on another no, I'm ghost.
everything about blackbear makes me want to punch him in the throat, and I don't think I'm the only one. Indeed, critics who have given a pass to far worse in this genre seem put off by blackbear's tastelessness and its vapidity, obsessed with gaudy brands and oblivious obnoxiousness. And yet, despite having the most punchable face and personality since Ajit Pai, his delusions, in a lot of them he thought it would be a good idea to release this, an absolutely awful breakup song that makes me want to sympathize with everybody except blackbear. And while the music nerd in me finds the sing-song upward progression bothersome because it doesn't actually correspond with the actual scale that Do, Re, Mi is associated with, the bigger issue, it's entirely linked to blackbear himself, a guy who cannot remotely sell anger or contempt in this breakup beyond a breezy dismissiveness that reeks of unearned ego. How the hell does he get off dumping a girl for being vapid and obsessed and cheating, whereas all the evidence in the world that he is just like her and would easily do the same? And when you pair it with the nursery rhyme melodies and the framing, which would imply a level of immaturity in this situation that none of the content effectively matches, we're left with one of the shallowest songs that charted this year. Well, okay, not quite. Number 7. You know, going into 2017, I had the hope that in the rise of the current US political establishment that there would be some sort of protest music that would gain some traction. Given the polarized media climate, I definitely think there would be a passionate audience for it, providing it was any good. But watching a dead-end hip-hop review and interview with Uncommon NASA place some things in perspective and context. That when you target or weaken the support structures and livelihood of artists who will speak truth to power, which, by the way, this new tax bill that passed directly does, as well as pretty much any sort of self-employed YouTuber in the US, just to provide you some context of why I'm so goddamn angry about it, it becomes that much harder to make that art and make that truth. And thus most listeners in the mainstream are stuck with the established artist, like who gave us this.
It's your favorite song. Dance, dance, dance to the distortion. Turn it up, keep it on repeat. Stumbling around like a wasted zombie. Yeah, we think we're free. Drink, 'cause one's on me. We're all chained to the rhythm, to the rhythm, to the rhythm.
This was a song that got worse with every single listen, and it's a perfect metaphor for Katy Perry's disastrous 2017, which showed her repeatedly stabbing herself in the face hole with terrible idea after terrible idea. But you know what? There was a seed of something worthwhile here in reconciling an unthinkable defeat that shows how closely Katy Perry ties herself to the Democratic campaign in 2016. Shame that she did it in the worst way possible, making a retro dance song that's more disco with all the flavor of wallpaper that actively scolds the audience and even herself for dancing. What's all the worse is the questions that she's trying to ask on the verses, the sort of misplaced self-doubt for the pre-chorus that will then neuter it by telling her just embrace nostalgia and those rose-colored glasses regardless. Even if I agree with the whole living in the bubble and tone deafness that Katy Perry seems to imply on that side, and I don't, she doesn't even engage with the question, choosing to seal herself in a bubble of her own ignorance. And you know, I get the feeling that Skip Marley was here to show a new way forward with all that symphonic swell and bombast between the lockstep monochromatic beat that drowns out any solid guitar line and all the reverb. There's no firepower or real energy for anyone to break away from this utterly depressing turd of a song. What's all the more ironic is that all the questions that Katy Perry asks might as well be applicable to herself, especially after her 2017 with a terrible album that's getting all the scorn it righteously deserves. This isn't a we conversation, Katy Perry. Really? It's just you. Number 6. So I mentioned Vine earlier, and I'll admit for as much awful music that it was responsible for the charts in the mid-2010s, there were Vine stars that made the jump to YouTube that I actually don't mind. A lot of them fall in the David Dobrik vlog group, and one of them is Gabby Hanna, although she's pretty popular all on her own. And she actually released a few songs of her own this year that I actually thought weren't that bad at all. They're better than anything on this list. I think her vocal tone would be better fit towards rock or emo or punk, but they weren't bad pop songs. But then she cited this person as an influence in one of her vlogs, and I couldn't help but really cringe. Gabby, girl, you can do so much better than this.
Let's give you glory. All our problems, 'cause we got the kind of love it takes to solve them. Yeah, I got issues, and one of them is how bad I need you.
I don't think I have said this enough in 2017, but let me make it abundantly clear. Julia Michaels, either behind the scenes or in front of the mic herself, is one of the worst pop artists I have heard in some time. She might have co-written a few songs that I otherwise like All in Your Head Flex from Fifth Harmony and Fetty Wap, even though Fetty Wap's more of the reason why that track works, or Good For You by Selena Gomez featuring A$AP Rocky, but there's something about her jittery, overwritten style and weird submissive bent that just makes my skin crawl. I get putting vulnerability in a pop song, but when you pair with lyrical references showing the guy is violent and borderline abusive and then never hold anybody accountable in the text, subtext, or framing, I will draw a hard line against that. Especially when your production embraces a faux elegant strings arrangement with a blocky beat that sounds like a bad demo. And yet the big reason for this is that Julia Michaels is here on this track herself. She's a terrible singer. This husky delivery might work for somebody like Lorde or Alessia Cara, who have the intensity or personality or stage presence to hold their own, but not only does Julia Michaels not have this in the Halsey vein, she also has no clear idea of her range, constantly going flat on the high notes and a delivery that makes her sound like she's whimpering through the entire song. It's really gross. And while she hasn't been able to follow this up with any songs off that AP that nobody cares about, the fact that she's still allowed to co-write for artists like Pink is actively infuriating. Again, America, you wanted this instead of Lorde. I ask the question again. What in the nine hells was wrong with you? Number 5. So, coming back to artists who didn't exactly have a good 2017.
I've been down so long, it look like up to me. They look up to me. I got fake people showing fake love to me. Straight up to my face. Straight up to my face.
I'm seeing Drake's playlist album show up on a lot more year-end lists than it really should. Mostly because it's utterly forgettable Drake, except when Drake tries to make his unconvincing grime impression click, which was really just embarrassing. Now this was his biggest hit of 2017, and yet I'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who really liked it in comparison with Passion Fruit, which at least had some groove to it. Fake Love doesn't even have that. Between the gross, watery plucks and the half-gargled crack of the beat, including these odd little chirping sounds against an overweight bass line, and Drake's hideously overwrought hook, is a song that makes him sound drunk on cheap wine and trying a Young Thug impression while getting tased in the scrotum. And those are the sounds that fit in perfectly with a song about paranoia and people lying to you, Drake? No sense of dread or fear or even much anger. It sounds like he's trying to force an emotion and nobody can clearly recognize what that emotion is, and even if it isn't there to begin with. It's an ugly, misshapen lump of a track that if Drake hadn't released so many other examples of walking cringe throughout his career, people would probably be focusing on this a lot more. And as such, you know what? It's been quite a while since he's been gone, but it's only a matter of time before she shows up to embarrass himself again, so let's hope it's not like this. Number 4. And on the topic of awful singing...
Hop out, drop top, fuck your talking, I need it right now. Cash in the area, what goes up, gotta come down.
I really have no idea how to evaluate Rae Sremmurd's success in 2017. Black Beatles was huge, and Sway Lee got a prime guest spot by ripping off The Weeknd on Unforgettable with French Montana, but really, beyond that? Apparently they're putting out the 3rd Shrem Life record in a month. You know, start off 2018 right, but Perplexing Pegasus, the lead-off single, wasn't really much of a hit, and I've got no idea if they'll be able to sustain any sort of momentum, especially against all the competition. What I can tell you is that I don't even think Rae Sremmurd apologists like this song, it would be obvious why. Because, you know what, I actually don't think the synth-heavy production is all that bad, and while the lyrics, well, I think Slim Jimmy might regret dropping out of school where his career flames out, which is just a matter of time. But beyond that, it's just vapid, half-formed rhymes that are more a free association pile-up than anything that's meaning anything. No, this song is on the list for that hook, that awful goddamn hook, where Sway Lee leads into his ear-grating falsetto, where it's clear that not even auto-tune could have corrected for how badly he is off-key. It's honestly a little bit amazing. You have to seriously try to sound this awful. And the fact that nobody in audio engineering decided to ask for a second take blows my mind. And it might be rare that I put a song this high on the list for just one solitary thing that just got under my skin, but it's the sort of sound that makes me run into incoming traffic. If it didn't kneecap Rae Sremmurd's prospects as a duo going forward, it certainly was a blow, and for damn good reason. Number 3. In contrast, in comparison with the one thing that made a song appalling before, here's a song that is atrocious that will show up on pretty much everybody's list for all of the things.
Look what you made me do. Look what you made me do. Look what you just made me do. Look what you just made me. Ooh. Look what you made me do. Look what you made me do. Look what you just made me do. Look what you just made me do.
I think pretty much every music critic on the internet has already kind of picked this song clean. Its defenders are nowhere to be seen anymore, and with reputation sinking like a stone with both critics and audiences, it's hard not to see his Look What You Made Me Do as the biggest miscalculation of Taylor Swift's entire career. But what makes this song perversely fascinating is that there was potential of this? Yeah, I'm not kidding. Between those staccato piano chords driving the pre-chorus and the bridge, and Taylor Swift playing into her surprisingly potent nasty side, which isn't terrible, there are traces of something might have clicked in this heel turn. And yet, whenever I get kind of close to defending it or liking it, the song reveals something new in some sort of excruciating way to piss me off. The framing of a narrative that, if it does exist, barely makes a lick of sense. The complete inability for the production to sell genuine menace, thanks to a hook that's sampling I'm Too Sexy, where Taylor Swift downplays, and Jack Antonoff reading the entire situation as camp, which Taylor Swift is not remotely selling. The utterly incoherent pileup of noises on the verses and throughout the hook, including what sounds like samples from We Are the Strange that nobody has called out. And finally, an utterly confused victim narrative that not only sounds divorced from any sort of reality or specific details, but can't even really fit within the context of the album. Critics have already made comparisons to this sounding like a Black Eyed Peas song, and yeah, they're right. But what's truly galling is that Taylor Swift thought this diluted melody could actually soundtrack a convincing villain song in that vein. If you want to look at what a villain looks like on the Hot 100 that might deserve some hatred, number 2. If you only get your exposure to what's popular on the mainstream off of the year-end list, you might not understand the depths of my venom toward this guy. Most because most of his tracks were never big enough to truly break through in the mainstream. Oh, they charted. I talked about them on Billboard Breakdown, but mostly in the bottom half of the Hot 100. They never got past that, never really breaking through. And his one other hit this year was a guest on a much more promising artist, and that actually had a decent hook. It wasn't a bad song. But if we're looking at one of the acts who spent the year at the forefront of the cultural garbage fire, it's hard to find an act more central to the conversation than Kodak Black.
I call that they don't like to see you winning. They wanna see you in a penitentiary. I need me a little baby who gon' listen. Girl, I don't wanna be the one you again.
If we're looking for a song that celebrates and encourages the very worst impulses in mainstream rap, it'd be harder to find any as big this year as Tunnel Vision, which had a video that got popular on cheap viral controversy, which of course let Kodak Black enable other sources of cheap virality like Danielle Bregoli, thank him for that, and somehow let the American public skate past all the sexual assault charges for which he'll be standing trial in multiple states. And while I could spend the next hour describing how Kodak Black is a loathsome human being, it doesn't seem to show the slightest shred of guilt for anything that he's done. He only struck the I get any girl I want, I don't gotta rape line from this song because it might exacerbate his legal case. The reality is that Tunnel Vision was garbage right from the start outside of this. The awful guitar tuning is the wispy flutes, the cheap trap snares and the hi-hats, and Kodak's nasal, mumbled non-flow on a hook that can barely hold together to a beat and forces entirely too many rhymes which when it bothers at all. The song is already 70% hook, which tries to rhyme winning with penitentiary, which Kodak's voice oozes over like slime, and on that note, the content. Tell me, ladies, do you want to be the lil baby that constantly enables Kodak's horniness? He comes when he sees money, bragging about getting any girl he wants, sure to make you feel all so special, and has such lines like, I'm the shit, I need some toilet paper. So what? You implying that you're worth wiping out and flushing to get rid of you? Because I might be okay with that. What's all the more infuriating is that the second verse with his mother encouraging him to kill people, I don't care if it's on the mic or not, it probably isn't. You realize that there's nothing and nobody in Kodak Black's life who is telling him not to kill or rape people. And with the framing that normalizes all of it as part of his hustle, it's not hard to believe why he thinks he's gonna get away with it. Cause America let him. And considering how often he violates his parole and still has charges to answer, yeah, we might not be hearing any more Kodak Black going forward. You know what? I'm just fine with that. And finally, number 1. Okay, really, was it ever gonna be anything else?
Body like a back road, driving with my eyes closed. I know every curve like the back of my hand. Doing 15 and 30, I ain't in no hurry. I'ma take it slow, just as fast as I can.
Ladies and gentlemen, the biggest country song of 2017, and one of the biggest hits of the year across any genre. It's in the top 10 of the Hot 100 for the year end. And the list of things wrong with it seems to stretch on for miles, and unlike Look What You Made Me Do, there were no redeeming factors. The utterly shrill guitar tuning that opens up against the lazy snap, the fake drums, the gang vocals, and a fragmented guitar progression that trick listeners into thinking this isn't another trap song from 2014. This is bro country production at its most meat-headed, zombified, and lifeless, full of wolf whistling, contemptible dick pistons who deserve Sturgill Simpson breaking a guitar over their skulls. And then there's Sam Hunt himself, who pushes his lazy, phoned-in faux rapping with a mugging self-satisfaction that clearly shows he doesn't give a shit how much hip-hop iconography he's stealing, and he wouldn't care even if he did. And it's the same cluelessness that infects the writing like the scrotal cancer that it is. Dude, if it takes you 6 weeks to get your girl's number, you have no game to be so insufferably proud of. And what makes it all the more appalling that he stressed this song is about his wife. So then you get to describe her body like a back robe, repurposing what has been a country music insult for decades to make it all about the ass that you're groping. And congratulations that you can take her pants off without any help. And then you don't need to see where you're going because you're taking it so slow. But the mingled metaphor makes me think that you're just going straight into the ditch driving with your eyes closed. But you know what? Here's what genuinely infuriates me reading through this song. In the second verse, he goes on about how there ain't no curves like her on a downtown streets. And besides the grammatical atrocity, the problems are twofold. One, if you're talking like there's no curves on the grid-like city streets, you've clearly never been to Boston or really most cities. But the deeper conceit is that city girls plainly don't have butts like his wife's. And yet, you think with all the urban slang and the hip-hop production that he throws around, you'd realize how overwhelmingly full of shit you are, Sam Hunt. Let's make this abundantly clear. This song and Sam Hunt are just as much cultural grave robbers as Post Malone is, but they're somehow too stupid to realize the tropes that they're bastardizing. Country musician and iconoclast Steve Earle made the statement that mainstream country stars like this make hip-hop for people who are afraid of black people. Ladies and gentlemen, Exhibit A. Worst hit song of 2017. I'm out. Until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.